culture with worldviews which once would have been considered inconceivable but are now considered honorable, a small voice cries out in the wilderness. A voice which is unwilling to surrender to the demands or the madness of the woke culture. This voice may be small, and yet it holds great power. Power that cannot be weighed on the scales of a godless culture, but power that will nonetheless stand the test of time, because it is the truth. Welcome, pilgrims, to the Pugnacious Pilgrim Podcast. We are glad you are here with us today, and we are hopeful that you will walk away informed, enriched, and equipped to live as pilgrims in a brave new world.
Mikey, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, dude. A little
Good.
stressed out. I'm a little behind the curve here, but that's all right. We're going to make it happen. We're going to do this. We're live. We're excited to be live. So welcome, pilgrims. Thanks for joining us live. We always appreciate it. We got a big show lined up. I think one that we've been a little excited about. You got some Christmas decorations behind you.
I do.
hung, I don't know if you could say on the chimney with care, but they're hung on the background. So we care about aesthetics. We're in the month of December. We got a lot going on here.
Yeah, and this may be the most festive I'll get all year. So.
That's true, and there's something to say about that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I do get pretty festive during bowling, I suppose.
You got some Christmas cheer going on, which I definitely appreciate. So, speaking of bowling, that's
we're going right into it, huh?
well, why not? We welcomed our pilgrims to the show. We're happy to have them on board, and certainly for those that are joining live, we want to encourage you to go ahead and join the chat as well and say hello so we know who's joining us and chime in during the conversation. As you can tell by the theme slide that we have at the bottom here, we're talking about propaganda tonight, message media and manipulation, and so we got quite a bit to cover in that arena.
Yeah, and we've crafted it just so
come on,
we would portray a certain message, and so that we could help indoctrinate the public.
Right.
We are participating in propaganda.
Yeah, for sure.
At the Pugnacious
undoubtedly, that is part of what's going on here.
We're making pugnacious propaganda.
Pugnacious propaganda. I like that.
Yeah, which is better than normal propaganda.
It is. Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna have propaganda, I can't even say it, which is probably a problem because it's primarily what we're going to be talking about this evening.
Properly pronouncing propaganda is a problem.
It's pretty pugnacious as well.
Pugnacious problem for pugnacious pilgrims.
Well, another problem, speaking of problems, is, I'm not sure what this feels like, so I'm leaning on you to help me out here. We kind of want to talk about what it's like, a day in the life of a 198 bowler, which would be you.
You know what? Celebrating a 198 game is like saying, hey, I beat all my coworkers in ping pong. None of them really play ping pong, but I did win the tournament. Like, I wanted 200 so bad. It would have been my first 200 game all year. I haven't bowled a 200 game since I was in like my teens, and I bowled a 198. I choked. But it's still like, actually, let me pull this up because I have your high game too.
Yeah. Oh,
and I'm going to throw you right under the bus.
I appreciate it because I'm not claiming to have a high game at all.
Your high game is 176. However, your average is much better than mine.
I wouldn't say much better.
Your handicap's like 10 points higher, or 10 points lower, I should say.
Yeah. So what am I? I'm at 75 and creeping up, and you're at what 84 and
83 and creeping
coming down. You know,
Yeah.
so you're on the right trend. I would say I'm not on the right trend.
Yeah. I just have to say, so I bowled 2 strikes, then I threw a split, couldn't convert, and then bowled 4 strikes in a row. And then, like, could hardly even close a frame again after that. So I'm like, I've got 200, like, locked. Like, this is the best start I've had forever. And I came 2 pins shy of my 200 goal. Maybe if I would have shot for, like, 250. Maybe then.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what we need to do. Like, so I have a goal of trying to close out every frame. What I should really aim for is closing out every frame, all 3 games, because then I might get a little bit closer to actually doing it one game of our 3. We're in a bowling league for those that aren't aware.
Well-
So we play 3 games of bowling every week, and what I've discovered, how many weeks are we in now? 13 or something like that.
We've bowled 13 weeks. Yeah.
What I've discovered 13 weeks in, and I've only bowled 12 of those 13, is that bowling is a game of averages, and sadly, my average is exactly where it should be. Like you said, the highest game I've ever had was 175 or 170 something.
172 or 3,
Yeah.
I think.
So,
Or no, 176.
and that was like me trying as hard as I possibly could. I mean,
Yeah.
I do that always anyway, but I don't know if I'll see anywhere near 200. So I don't know what
I
it's
think
like.
you'll get there.
I mean, you must have woke up pretty like just on top of the world today, right?
No.
I mean, did breakfast taste sweeter?
I don't eat breakfast.
But
so
if you did eat breakfast, I'm sure it would have tasted
the cup
sweeter.
of coffee tasted pretty. I mean, there wasn't any sweetener in it, but it did taste sweeter than usual. And I will have you know, I've been waking up at 5:30 every morning
Oh my
because I'm
goodness.
trying to turn my life around.
Well, that
and
might, yeah.
I've been trying to work out, and I started yesterday. So that's probably why
You
I
bowled
was
almost 200.
woke up, read a chapter in a book, did some laundry, and then did some burpees and put the coffee
Oh
on.
my goodness. That, I mean, it's kind of coming together. I mean, you're sold out to this thing.
I
mean,
know,
You
I-
do all that so you can bowl 200, right? I mean, that's what it
Right.
takes.
I mean, I've already accomplished being a successful adult, so I can just hang it up whenever I choose to at this point. Now I'm just making everybody look bad.
right.
So,
Well,
yeah, I've conquered
congratulations.
humility, I've conquered adulthood, I've conquered bowling, obviously. Even though we had a guy who almost bowled a 300, still not as good as me. So
yeah. I mean, he's been doing it a lot longer than us, and I mean, to be
Yeah.
honest, he's out of our league, or we're out of his, whichever
he's
we
out of
wanna
our
say
league.
it.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say, because we have had Coach Drummer on the podcast before, kind of giving you the rundown of what his expectations are of you, and I think, to be honest, I don't think you've let him down. I wonder sometimes if I have. I've bought a lot of pretzels on our. I've been hung several times.
Well, I'm buying the next pretzel.
Yeah,
And we hung Dustin last night.
we hung him twice, almost
did,
3
twice.
times. So
For anybody listening, a hanging isn't what it sounds like. It's when everybody bowls a strike in a frame except for one guy. He has to buy us a pretzel.
yeah,
So, you might hear us use language like there's going to be a hanging. Not like that.
it's
Not
a
like
different
that.
kind of hanging.
Different
yeah.
kind of hanging, which is totally politically correct and acceptable
Right.
no matter what you say.
Right.
Don't even argue.
Yeah,
So,
and if you want to take it out of context, I mean, feel free, because we're pugnacious
Yeah.
here. We don't really care
yeah,
that
feel
much.
feel free to be wrong. That's
yeah,
our message.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Especially on a night like tonight where we're talking about propaganda.
Exactly.
I guess where I was going with that is that, he kind of let us down last night. Not only did we hang him twice, but I think, I mean, if I'm correct, I think his last game was like in the 130s, dude.
It was, and mine was worse, but the bar's lower for me.
For sure, because I
So-
think with your handicap, I mean, you got to be spotting them at least 40 points or 40 pins or whatever you
well,
wanna
with
call it.
even with my handicap, I was at a 197. So my last game was like well below average. My game usually starts up like here, and then the second game is like right around my average, and then the third game is like 20 points below my average. So I
But-
need to clean it up.
I think that's because you're a humble guy. I mean, we've established that already on the show, but I think really what
Just
you're
come out swinging and then just let him
Well,
beat
and,
me
I mean, what you
afterwards.
try and do, because you're going head to head against somebody, right?
Yeah.
Someone from the other team is. I mean, you don't want to blow them out of the water every
Right.
single game, and that's not. You want that guy to go home happy, joyful. I mean, you're a
Exactly.
people's player.
Yeah,
you
plus
know?
the better I bowl, the lower my handicap gets, and then it's even harder for me to win.
Yeah, I mean that definitely defeats the purpose of sandbagging if you actually play up to your potential. So
That's right.
I think give them the taste of what you could do if you were really trying the whole time.
Yeah, just
So-
like, hey man, don't try anything. Look
Right.
what I'm capable
yeah,
of.
you know what I'm capable.
Yeah,
of.
my shirt, I got this new bowling shirt that says bowling on it, and it has bowling pins on it, just in case anybody was confused about what I'm there to do. And this shirt, I feel like there's just a certain energy that comes with the shirt. And I even got told by somebody that it looked like a women's shirt.
Oh, really? Were the
Which-
buttons on the wrong side on that one?
No,
Okay.
they're not. It's just a very blousey shirt.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
You know, but that, man, that just fueled the fire. I was just like, I'll show this guy.
Yeah,
you
not
know?
only are you going to lose to someone who's wearing a woman's shirt, but you're going to lose badly, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what you did.
And the guy that was up against me, he lost the first game. We won't talk about what happened afterwards.
That doesn't
because
matter.
he lost the first game by so many points that it almost doesn't even matter.
Yeah, you already established dominance at that point. I mean,
I did.
What would the point of just rubbing it in be? You know.
Well, the point of any activity as a man is to establish dominance, and that's I stand by that.
I mean, that's yeah, exactly.
You can quote me on that.
That's quotable. We're gonna pull that out and definitely use it out of context a lot.
I hope you do.
Before we get too far, Mike, what are we drinking tonight? What's the whiskey of choice?
I left the bottle
did we?
upstairs.
Okay.
But it is Writer's Tears, which is an Irish whiskey.
Ooh, nice. It's pretty smooth, man. I like it. I mean, the color is light, but that's kind of common, right?
Yeah, with these big ice cubes in them too. But
okay.
It is a lighter whiskey.
I
mean, it punches above its weight class, I think. It's a relatively inexpensive Irish whiskey.
Cool.
So.
Wow, yeah, I like it. It's good. We do have some new ice in there. I made Mike put one in, so don't judge him for what he's got going on there. But as a present to myself, I got these big, frozen ice balls. So they work well. They make your glass look a lot fuller than it actually is.
They sure do.
So don't judge us on how full our glass is either. Well, we're going to move in, Mike, to really the main beef of our conversation. We've been doing things a little bit different recently, basically meaning we're trying to just be a little bit more conversational in how we run these podcasts, because I think, what we ended up doing is trying to just force feed like a fire hose a lot of content.
Yeah.
And it kind of got us away from really the point of the show, which is to kind of discuss these things that are happening in the world, but to do so from a Christian point of view and to try and understand, obviously we're in the world, right? We're called to be in the world. We're called to be light in the darkness. We're called to be the city on the hill. But how do we do that effectively as Christians? And how should Christians engage in some of these culturally relevant conversations and things going on? And so we don't shy away from controversial topics, and we're going to be jumping into a couple of those. So, if you're joining us on the podcast, what we would want to say is, stick around. We're not hoping to change anyone's mind. We're really hoping this evening that we can have a discussion that would maybe help people think critically, right? We don't aim to get people to think just like us, right, Mike? That's not the point of what we do.
Although if they did, the world would be a better place.
Right. I mean, we definitely would say that, life would be better for you. But if you don't want life to be better for you, that's fine. I mean,
that's a joke, by the way.
And
that's the disclaimer. That's a joke, just in case you didn't understand that.
Life would be better if people thought critically, really is what we're trying to get at. And I think one thing about propaganda in general is that it's really aimed to try and make you not think critically. It's trying to let people think for you and just let the message control the narrative to the point where people just stop thinking altogether. And so that's what we want to tackle. And really the first one that we want to get at, because, apparently there's a new, is it version, or what do they say? It's not a version. I mean, there's a new mutation of the coronavirus,
a new strain
on the streets, a new strain.
Yeah, that's what is it, like an anagram for moronic?
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever. Omicron.
I mean, we skipped right past Z, I guess. I mean, they're using the Greek alphabet. They were trying to be sensitive to China, who gave the world the virus.
Right, they didn't want anybody to get the wrong idea and
I mean,
associate this virus with China.
Yeah, I mean, we understand that Kung Flu is totally culturally insensitive, and we'll never use the word Kung Flu on this show. In fact,
Which word?
Kung Flu. If I ever hear anyone say Kung Flu on this show, I'm going to be very upset. I will never say Kung Flu.
I never will say Kung Flu either.
I hope not. So we're just, it's off limits. No Kung Flu on this show. You're never going to hear that word from Mike and I. I think it's not very nice. I mean, when China gives the world a pandemic, the nicest thing that I think you could do is at least let the chips fall where they may. And if a Greek letter happens to be the same last name as the Chinese emperor, like, why would you not why would you not go with that? That seems kind of selfish, and I mean, it's just not fair.
Virtue signaling.
Yeah.
It's what it comes down to.
So we
and
have,
it's so dumb. The whole thing is so dumb.
well, it is moronic, right? So
It
it's
is
almost
moronic.
like you wish that they
Yeah.
would have just stuck with moronic as the next name of the next
Yeah.
variation of this. But anyway, we it's not only is it in the world and prevalent, but apparently it's also hit California, and like all good things, it came to Minnesota as well. So we were the second state in the union, the greatest nation on God's green earth, that actually ended up, registering a case of this. And so panic and run, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that became the immediate message.
I thought I saw an article that was posted in several different places. I didn't click on any of them because I don't really like click on articles anymore.
Headlines are enough.
Honestly, a lot of the time, and I hate that I'm even saying that, but if I see 3 headlines from different news sources, usually it's a decently credible thing.
Right.
But so there were like 14 or 15 people that were on a plane that all tested positive for the Omicron variant, that were all from like a certain country. I forget if it was like the Netherlands or New Zealand. I remember N for some reason. I don't remember. But like every single person on this plane was already vaccinated,
Yeah.
like fully vaccinated.
Yep.
And I know it just seems like I'm kind of like talking off the top of my head, because I totally am. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt.
Yeah, do your own
Look
research.
it up for yourself.
Be the Bereans.
But I'm confident enough that I at least saw that headline enough times that I believe it's true, but I'm open to being corrected. So,
Well, and that's good. I mean, we should be. I mean, be aware. Obviously, fear porn is a real thing. We've talked a little bit about it on the show. In fact, we were going to do a total episode on fear, but we were too scared to do it, and
Yeah.
I understand why. I'm
I was
not blaming
horribly
you or
terrified.
me for that. I mean, fear is fearful, and it leaves you very afraid, which I think
Yeah.
is maybe the point of fear, but I'm not entirely sure, because we just refused to go there because we were too scared. But anyway, one thing that people have been afraid of is using horse tranquilizer, horse pills, really, to treat COVID, and so that's been off limits. In fact, there's been a lot of what people would say misinformation. Like Joe Rogan got sick and immediately just started taking horse medicine, and really was trying to encourage people to do that. And that's sad. It's really sad that he would do that. And I don't know why he would do that. I mean, he's not a doctor. He did get this prescribed by his doctor, which makes you question, like, did this guy even
who gave that guy a medical license?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably was.
What, did he go to a veterinarian?
But all kidding aside, ivermectin, which is a miracle drug, won the Nobel Peace Prize for not only being safe but being highly effective in treating things like what was it, like parasites
Yeah, it was
and
for
things like that.
It's an anti-parasite.
Parasitic or whatever.
Yeah,
but
I forget what it is.
they actually have seen it have, even historically, some
antiviral
Yeah,
effects too.
exactly.
Yeah.
But this article dates December 1st, 2021. And it says hospitals refused to prescribe ivermectin. Threats and lockdowns followed. Hospitals in Idaho, and this is coming from ABC or NBC News. I don't want to give credit where credit isn't due. Anyway, hospitals in Idaho and Montana called police after patients' family members threatened violence if their loved ones weren't treated with the antiparasitic drug. This is a story by Matt Volz from Kaiser Health News. He says Helena, Montana, one Montana hospital went into lockdown and called police after a woman threatened violence because a relative was denied her request to be treated with ivermectin. Officials of another Montana hospital accused public officials of threatening and harassing their healthcare workers for refusing to treat politically connected COVID-19 patient with antiparasitic drug of hydroxychloroquine, another drug unauthorized by the FDA to treat COVID. And in neighboring Idaho, crazy red state Idaho, a medical resident said police had to be called to a hospital after a COVID patient's relative verbally abused. Can you believe that? Verbally abused, Mike, her, and threatened physical violence because she would not prescribe ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, drugs, quote unquote, that are not beneficial in the treatment of COVID-19.
First thing that comes to my mind, Jason, basket of deplorables.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know?
for sure. I mean, I hate to give Hillary Clinton any credit whatsoever, but on this one, I think she definitely deserves
Why?
it.
Is it because she's a woman?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
No, what's weird to me, and I'm not a doctor, Jason, but it certainly seems like your chances of dying of COVID go way up when you go to the hospital.
Yeah, what's that all about? That's weird.
Now, the counter argument to that is like, oh, well, of course, because if it's bad enough to go to the hospital, then it's obviously a bad case. And with that, I agree. But we also have doctors that are only prescribing treatments that have money to be made.
Yeah,
It's
non-generics.
it's the strangest thing. They'll only go with the medicine that the money is behind instead of these perhaps cheaper and maybe even more effective solutions
alternatives
that
for
are
sure.
way less invasive and experimental. You know, that's we've talked
Right.
about it so many times on this podcast, but that's the kind of stuff that just like doesn't jive
Right.
with me and a lot of other critical thinkers.
Yep.
So, goodness, I just called myself a critical thinker. I'm trying to be a critical thinker. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying.
Yeah, and I mean, to use the term critical thinker, I think that will soon be censored. It's problematic. Even trying to be a critical thinker in this day and age is so like anti-science. I mean,
It is
just-
racist. It
it's
starts with a
racist.
C, and so does Caucasian.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, when you think critical race theory, I think underlining that whole movement is to
Yeah.
get rid of this idea of critical thinking. We're not supposed to do that. And I hope I hope if we learn anything in this global pandemic, it's that critically thinking people actually are responsible for killing grandparents. And
Yep.
so I hope
Yep.
that, I mean, the blood is on their hands.
Using the word critical thinker is actually a shibboleth for racist people.
I didn't know that, but I mean, to me, I mean, when you say that out loud, it actually makes really good sense to my mind.
I know, because I said it. So,
Well, so here's the deal. Like, I mean, we're being facetious here on purpose, right? Because we have a wonder drug. Literally, when this thing came out, it was called a miracle drug in the scientific community, which
Yeah.
they don't use the word miracle lightly. In fact,
No.
they don't even like to use the word miracle at all,
Right.
because it's not scientific. But they used it, and not only did they use it, but they gave the Nobel Peace Prize, or the Nobel Prize, to the the manufacturer of this drug and the founders of this drug, because it was not only cheap, it was also, I think, something they found in like dirt. Like,
Yeah.
it was organic. It was, it was wonderful. And it had proven to be so beneficial in like helping with malaria and some of these other things that were plagues on the world, right?
Yep.
But it's political now. It's a drug that is political. It's a drug, like you said, that is generic, so there isn't money associated with it, just like hydroxychloroquine, right? Like, these are drugs that have been around and are safe and are effective, that have very limited side effects, if any at all, right? And they can't be used.
Yeah, we have to avoid them.
So here's what's funny, right? We're talking about propaganda. There was another news article actually that hit the streets today, like right as mainstream media, NBC is telling us that this drug is horrible, and people are being held hostage in hospitals because they're demanding that it be given to their dying family members, right? But coincidentally, and that's all I can think of, it's just a coincidence, and we shouldn't read too much into this, but today, a dying COVID-19 patient actually recovered after the court got involved and ordered a hospital to administer ivermectin. This comes from it's all over non-mainstream media, which is weird. That mainstream.
So it's not credible, is what that means.
Well, I think what it means is that, again, it probably doesn't fit into the propaganda package that is being given to most mainstream. But again, if you want real news, you really got to search for it, and definitely not on Google. I would recommend DuckDuckGo, because they don't have the same algorithms that
that's actually
suppress
true.
stories. I'm not being funny. I'm being serious. But, take it for what it's worth. An elderly COVID-19 patient has recovered after a court order allowed him to be treated with ivermectin. It took a court order.
Land of the free, man.
Land of the free, home of the brave. Despite objections from the hospital in which he was staying, according to the family's attorney, after an Illinois hospital insisted on administering expensive, how do you say that? Remdesivir?
Remdesivir
to the patient, and the treatment failed, his life was saved after a court ordered that an outside medical doctor be allowed to use the inexpensive ivermectin to treat him over the hospital's strenuous objections.
Yeah, well, and that remdesivir, like, that stuff is potentially very bad news.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
oddly enough, it coincides with organ failure, which early on was a supposed side effect of getting COVID, or symptom of COVID-19 was organ failure. Like, a lot of the experts were like,
that doesn't make sense.
A coronavirus that's shutting down people's organs? Like, what? And then you come to find out all of these people are being treated with remdesivir, and then things get way worse.
Right.
Just weird. Just an odd,
I mean, we're not trying to. We're not doctors. I mean, my wife used to call me the doctor of love, but I think that was unrelated.
No, you know what else is a weird coincidence? So you said this is an elderly man, right?
Yes.
Also coincidentally probably receiving Social Security. And
On
for
Medicare?
whatever reason, the hospital's like, maybe we should treat him with something that's got a high likelihood of killing him.
Yeah, like, and not only that, but we're charging the government this money's, I mean, it's a bottomless pit. Medicare part B or Part D or whatever, like it's ironic. The story,
I mean, if I was the government and I was trying to get out of having to pay Social Security, what would I do differently?
Yeah, well, true.
I don't know.
I don't know. Let's just say there's a lot of money changing hands. If you keep people alive, there's a lot of money in keeping them alive. And if you don't keep people alive,
up to a certain age.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Once they're retired, they're not putting into the system anymore the way that you want them to. But we gotta increase the turnover.
But Medicare for all, there's a reason for that, right? And it's because of the amount of taxpayer dollars that go into that program. So anyway, I mean, again, we're not professionals here. We're not scientists. In fact, we're Christians, so we're probably anti-science.
Yeah, so, this hat has a tinfoil lining underneath it. You can't tell, but it's there.
Right, and we built it into our Pugnacious Pilgrim hat as well. But the story actually goes on to say that ivermectin tablets have been approved by the U.S. FDA to treat humans with intestinal parasites like we talked about. Some topical forms of ivermectin have been approved to treat external parasites such as head lice for skin conditions and stuff like that. And the drug is also approved for use on animals. So it is approved for use. But
just like penicillin is a horse antibiotic.
Right, and actually, there is Tylenol for dogs, so I don't know. Am I taking...
Why would you take medicine for dogs, Jason?
Exactly. So remdesivir is currently approved by the FDA for emergency use only.
Yeah, which
actually,
was also another one of Fauci's brainchildren.
Yeah,
the whole drug.
He definitely has a lot of money into this, and not saying that would swayed him. I think he's a totally stand-up guy. So
he's altruistic.
I'm definitely not trying to point fingers. But what I am saying is that herein lies the problem, right? This isn't a one-off story where some guy was miraculously saved by ivermectin. In reality, this guy was on his deathbed, and only because he was on his deathbed and this thing went to court did an outside doctor from outside the hospital get permission to begin treating this man with ivermectin. And coincidentally, it saved his life. I get it's not approved for COVID. In fact, COVID is actually, believe it or not, COVID-19 is a brand new disease, which really doesn't have any medical treatments that are approved beyond emergency use to cure.
But what's the business in trying all these medicines that we already have, Jason? What's the business in that? The hospital, the medical system, listen, Jason, what you don't understand is that the medical system is a business, okay? And we need money to change hands in order to save people's lives. Do you want people to die, Jason?
Well, actually, I don't want people to die, which is why
sounds like you want people to
really
die.
believe in this idea of right to try, especially on the deathbed.
Yeah.
Now, the article goes on to say that critics have long accused the FDA of dragging its heels and being dangerously overcautious and indifferent to human suffering in its approach to regulating pharmaceuticals. A criticism that led to then President Donald Trump, and I'm sorry that I had to say that name on this program. I'll try not to do it again. He signed the Right to Try Act in May of 2018. The law, according to the FDA, is another way for patients who have been diagnosed with life-threatening diseases or conditions, who have tried all other approved treatments, even those that are only approved for emergency use, and who are unable to participate in clinical trials to access certain unapproved treatments. That's a law. It literally went through the legal system, unlike, things like maybe a vaccine mandate,
Just for example.
yeah,
Like,
I mean,
unrelated, but just
I'm pulled that one right out of thin
Yeah.
air. I don't even know why. It's
Right.
probably
Don't read
irrelevant
into it.
to this conversation. The point we're trying to make is we're talking about propaganda tonight, and this is just an example of something that fits right into that wheelhouse. There was a great podcast which I am recommending on the show, and I don't typically do this, but it was from Red Pilled America, and it was called Farmageddon. And if you really want to understand the money that's involved in this and why some of these decisions are being made, we would love to think that it's about altruism, right? It's not. We have no evidence to suggest this is about altruism at all, because what we know is that regardless if it's effective or not, this reality of giving people a right to try, or even having a say in what goes on with their own bodies, right? And into their own bodies, or even doctors that have been doing this for a long time that are trying to legitimately prescribe this medication to people, and they're being rejected at their pharmacy. Yeah. There is stuff going on that we have to pay attention to, and it falls directly into the wheelhouse of propaganda.
It definitely does. And I don't even think that the veil is like a thick one. Like, it's very, very thinly veiled.
Right.
The problem with propaganda is, though, it puts you in a position to have to continuously defend yourself against the false claims, or to defend your positions even though they may be false. So it conditions you to defend these false premises over and over and over and over again, to the point where there's literally no amount of reason that can change your mind. And that's why propaganda is so effective, right? Is that the claims that they make after a certain point, they don't even need to try and be reasonable, right? Because they know that you're going to defend them, and they don't even have to try.
Right.
I mean, look at all the articles that CNN and like MSNBC have posted in the last, 2 years, where they've waited a couple months and then they redact it, and then they issue like a small apology,
right.
And like the damage has been done.
Right. Yeah.
And
in this case, the damage was literally this guy's life. And I the families.
And how many people weren't so lucky?
Far too many. I mean, I personally, I'm not taking ivermectin. I would never take a horse pill. And I am being facetious, and maybe I need to stop, because in reality, my mom just fought COVID, and she is on the upswing, but I mean, COVID is nasty stuff. It is absolutely nasty. And if there are drugs that are available that could help and have shown evidence of helping, and people are not being allowed to get those prescriptions filled because of some politically driven reasons, I think that is absolutely criminal. And I'm not being funny. I mean, in this specific case, this elderly man who was dying, and the article says he was within days close to death, as soon as he was, allowed the opportunity by a judge. He had to take this all the way to a judge in Illinois. As soon as he was allowed to take ivermectin, it literally changed his life.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of the same types of cases that were happening pre-COVID in like Canada and the UK, right? Where doctors were determining that like sick children couldn't get experimental procedures or experimental treatments done. And these people literally had to try and like break out of their country to come to America to try and get these treatments, or to go wherever it was that they needed to go for these treatments, because their socialized healthcare essentially told the parents like, hey, there's nothing we can do. Oh, and by the way, if we find out that you're going somewhere else to get this treatment, there will be consequences.
Right.
Like, we complained about that. Like, the right wing almost as a whole used that kind of stuff as an argument against the government controlling healthcare. And now, unfortunately, there's a huge part of the right wing that is totally accepting these practices when it comes to COVID.
Right.
I mean, you look at the people who are standing against vaccine mandates, and most of the polls will tell you you're around like 25 to 30% of people.
Right.
So that means about half of the right wing is pro-mandate.
Yeah,
if you do the math.
If we're getting accurate numbers, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know plenty of people that are vaccinated that are definitely anti-mandate, and I guess, you know, we've now changed the definition of anti-vaxxer to include those who are vaccinated but don't agree with government mandates.
Well, the problem is you don't really have any pull if you've gotten vaccinated but you're anti-mandate. I mean, what are you going to do in protest? Like, show up with a sign?
I think so. I mean, you know, when we had Maya on the show,
I'm not saying it's going to do nothing,
right.
But if you're really trying to stand in protest, there's one way to do that, you know.
I think now you're absolutely right. There was probably plenty of people who were vaccinated before the mandate came out that basically, you know, found themselves making that choice because they felt it was what was best for them. But then they, you know, that was back when we had a promise from our president who said he would not mandate the vaccination, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, shame on us, right? We were fooled. Neil Johnson's joined the podcast, and he's asking actually about a Pugnacious Pilgrim book club, which I think we should start. He mentioned Pilgrim's Progress, which is a book that I have read and is excellent, and I would love to cover that on the show sometime. And then he also, talked about a book by Michael Horton, his Systematic Theology, which is titled The Christian Faith, A Systematic Theology for Pilgrims on the Way. And I will tell you, just because Neil brought it up, part of the reason for us using Pilgrim is directly tied to Pilgrim's Progress, because really when I think of Pilgrim, that's what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of Pilgrim on the journey, right? Which is what that whole book is about. It's an excellent book, highly recommended. I would love to start a Pugnacious Pilgrim book club and read through that book together, because I think it is so relevant to today, specifically. And I just heard someone talk about it the other day, where he ran into this character, Antichrist, who was really saying, look, dude, I've been on that journey. I've traveled that road towards, heaven, towards the promised land. And I can tell you it's a farce. There's nothing there. And so what I've chosen to do is leave and go back home and pick up all the things that I dropped along the way on my journey and just eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die, right? And that's a voice that is so prevalent right now, especially when I think about, you know, all these what do they call them? Deconversions or whatever, where people are like proclaiming their salvation and giving up on their faith. That's exactly what that book is talking about, is that perseverance of the saints is a real thing. And so, we need to do it.
Well, I need to read the book.
Yeah, so let's do it. I mean, Neil,
which is actually cool, because I'm getting into the discipline of reading
again,
right? I mean, and I'll tell you, the other night I was reading, and I actually got that feeling that I remember I used to get when I was in like elementary school, and I was like reading a book and really enjoying it.
Yeah.
I just remember like it just came upon me in like a wave, and it just like, it was so calming. And it's like that feeling that I feel is going to continue to enable me to like pick up books. And reading is cool, man. Reading is cool. It really is.
Yeah, it is. And it's enlightening, I think, especially in a time where our information is coming at us so fast, rapid fire, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all these platforms, right? The whole thing is, it's like we don't even have to try to get it, right? And yet,
Facebook is for the devil.
yeah, well, I mean, and we're going to get into that, right? What we're understanding a little bit is that, that's a method of propaganda, whereas, going back and reading some of these rich books from the saints of old and really understanding, the hardship and sitting down and really, like you said, having the self-discipline to say, no, I'm going to turn off all the noise and really focus on something that is for my good. I think it is good for us, and I would love for us really to do that together. So that's a great opportunity, and I think maybe we'll work out the details on how we can maybe do that together with some of our listeners and have some fun with it along the way. So
Good idea, Neil.
Yes, that's an excellent idea. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We're going to move on because actually, this was kind of a curveball. We weren't really going to talk about ivermectin, but it fit in well, I think, with the topic of propaganda.
Yeah.
Really, the one thing that kind of led to us sort of picking this show topic was, Kyle Rittenhouse. We haven't really addressed too much. We've kind of, skirted around it. We've used it a little bit, but
we haven't intentionally avoided it.
No,
though.
it's not. Yeah, it just never really fit into any of our topics. But now that the verdict is in, he was obviously found not guilty on all charges. You have to wonder at this point, looking back in hindsight, who was in charge of the message and where in the world were they getting their information? And why?
Man, you had a
why?
lot of people even coming out and saying that Kyle Rittenhouse was a racist murderer who killed people of color.
Right.
And then what's strange to me is like a bunch of people were like, "Oh no, he shot 3 white guys." And I'm like, "Wait, I thought he shot 2 Jewish guys and a white guy." And then it's like, "Wait, are Jewish guys white guys or are they Jewish guys? Are they people of color?" Only when it's convenient? I don't know.
Right.
So I don't know what the answer is there, but I mean, we can at least determine that he didn't shoot people based on the color of their skin because, I mean, they all looked like him,
Right.
except for they were attacking the guy with the AR-15, which just doesn't sound like a great idea to me, personally. But
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it up there on a smart choice.
yeah. Well, and I just have to say something really quick. The dangerous part of all of this is that the left has conditioned people that if they see somebody with a gun, they immediately assume that that person is evil.
Right.
They
Yeah.
immediately assume that that person needs to be neutralized. That's dangerous. Stop doing that. You can't do that.
Right.
Especially in a protest scenario.
Yeah. Where, I mean, literally, as the video evidence shows, he was there protecting a building. Again, he wasn't driven across state lines. He wasn't driven across state lines with his gun. He was already at his father's house, who lives in that area, hanging out with friends while the unrest began. And if you listen to his testimony, you'll hear him say he was there and he just felt compelled to do something. And so he didn't want to watch his city burn, and he didn't want to just watch as this place, which he had connections to, was destroyed by a mob, in his mind, a lot of which weren't even from there.
Yeah.
They were just opportunists, right?
Dude, and I have to just take this opportunity.
Yeah.
That is admirable.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't think he should have been there, like,
Someone should have been.
yeah,
Like,
ask yourselves, listeners, me, you, Jason, would you defend your community, or do you think it's inappropriate to get involved? Because the reason things have gotten as bad as they've gotten is because of the massive amount of people who feel like it's inappropriate to get involved.
Right.
If you don't get involved, it's going to burn down.
Right.
It's going to be taken by the people that you don't want to have it. That's what's happened to our nation. That's why we're trying to fight to get America back. We should have never given it up in the first place.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, again, like, this country was built on law and order. There's been many a times where we had to bring law and order, right? You look back to the Wild West and Wyatt Earp, like, there was bloodshed happening in the streets because there was no law or order, right?
Yeah.
Like, man's heart is intrinsically evil. We are not intrinsically good. We're not like flowing towards like some utopia where we're all just going to get along and kumbaya. We know that, right? Look back to Rodney King. That wasn't a man that was attempting to, do good things for his for his world and just happened to get beat down by some cops. Like, this is a guy who was drunk well beyond the legal limit, was on a high-speed police chase. They ended up, crashing his vehicle and getting into a point where he was, incapacitated, or his vehicle was, and they got him out, and he refused to listen to the law, right?
Yeah.
So law and order has a place in a just society. It has a place in a civilized society. And, really, I don't personally think I would ever be happy about sending my 17-year-old son to go and protect somebody's car dealership, right?
Right.
But I would hope that I would be the one that was there, that I would be the one tucking my kids into bed at night and saying, I love you, I want nothing but good for you, but Dad has an obligation to go and keep peace in this place where there is civil unrest. And otherwise, the rioters are, they have a free-for-all to do whatever they want.
Well,
and especially when the cops of that place were being told to stand down,
Right.
being told that they couldn't engage.
yeah. And, man, it's mostly a bummer because the people that are against Rittenhouse have been fed so much misinformation
Right.
that it has become radical. I mean,
For sure.
even more radical. I mean, you look at what happened in Wisconsin, like the weekend. What was it? The weekend after the verdict? It was the weekend of the verdict.
Of the verdict,
I think.
yeah.
A guy was mad and drove. Actually, let me report it the way that CNN reported it. There was a Christmas parade going on in Wisconsin, and an SUV just so happened to plow into a bunch of families
In a car accident.
car accident.
Yeah.
The SUV is at fault, even though we have the driver. Don't ask about his, politics. Don't ask about any of his motivation. It was just a car accident that just so happened to kill several children.
Right.
He's not being painted as a terrorist. As a matter of fact, since there was a mass shooting in Michigan, the story is conveniently covered up. Nobody's even reporting about it anymore.
Right, and not only that, but within a day.
Not a mass shooting, a school shooting.
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean, I think there were, 3 students that died and 6 that were, but even in that scenario, like we're only a couple of days removed from that, and he's already, that student who's 15 is not only being charged as an adult, but is also being charged with terrorism. So, I mean, it is
Right.
something that, terrorism is something that, and the justification that they use is that he brought terror upon his city, and have people living in fear now because of what occurred. But we're gonna get into the car accident a little bit later.
Yeah.
One thing I because we're a fact-based show, I don't know what news you were listening to, but the articles that I read and the news that I read, they did not call it a Christmas parade. They actually called it a holiday parade, even though it was literally called a Christmas parade. But they wanted to be a little bit more culturally sensitive, so they called it a holiday parade.
This is why I'm anti-semantic. I said anti-semantic.
Right.
Okay. Because these little games are so like shallow and pedantic.
Right. Yeah.
Shallow and pedantic. And it's just so dumb. Like, I listen to things like that, and I'm like, why couldn't you just call it what it is? Come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, why you got to call it a different thing? Like, it's evidence of this news speak
Right. Yeah.
that's going on in the mass propaganda.
Yes.
This is why I can't take the news seriously
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
I got into a big-time argument with my mom the other day. I'm like, you need to just turn off the news. And she's like, well, where do you get your information? I'm like, hey, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I try to diversify. I try to double check articles.
Yep.
We established earlier I only read the headlines. But hey, if it comes from several different places.
You're vetting it more than once.
If something, and again, you have to think critically. Does this sound unreal? Because if it sounds unreal, I'm going to take the extra time to look into it. Like, a lot of the times CNN will cover their tracks where, like, the body of the entire article will be this, like, sensationalist, like, nonsense. Like they wrote an article on the victims of Kyle Rittenhouse, and the one, like the first guy, one of the guys that he shot, he was like the homeless guy.
Yeah.
That
just like
just so
literally
happened to
got
be
out
a
of the-
convicted pedophile, right? But the entire like body of the article was talking about like him and how great of a guy he was, and like where he was in his life and his girlfriend, and like the nice things his girlfriend had to say. And then at the very end, it was like, also he's convicted of sexual activity with a minor. And then they
times,
just
yeah.
and then they just move on. And
Right.
it's like they do it so in such a professional way that you're just going to skip right over that
right.
part.
I mean, and it's subliminal messaging on purpose, right? The
Yeah.
reason it's a footnote is because they don't want you to think about it. They don't want you to think that it's
Right.
even a crucial part of the story. You know, and that's why we get things like we do with this next article that we're going to talk about, because this was about false information about Rittenhouse case was posted to James Madison University Instagram account. And so James Madison University is in hot water after a student posted a story to the university's Instagram account that had false information in it. The footage came from JMU student Daquan Nichols, who was posting content to the university's Instagram story. Nichols could be seen giving an informational promotion to his Day in a Life documentary, thanking the university and publicly announcing his disfavor with the Kenosha, Wisconsin verdict involving Illinois teenager Kyle Rittenhouse. We have that story. We're going to get to it, and then we'll circle back and discuss it further, because this is just more evidence of how this propaganda machine works. I don't think this guy is part of the propaganda machine. We're sharing this because this is what the propaganda machine actually aims to accomplish. And so here you go.
Documentary coming out, Film Fest, December 16th. We've been shooting one about me, a day in the life of Daquan Nichols. Thank you, JMU. Thank you to the entire Duke family. Thank you for being on Instagram and everything like that. After this post, I will be logging off. I simply wanted to publicly announce that the verdict of the Kyle Rittenhouse case has been nothing more than a disgusting reminder of what it's really like to be black in America. All the protesting, everything we went through in 2020, we really would think would make a change, but clearly it doesn't. We scream Black Lives Matter, but it doesn't matter enough for these people who are in power, the jury, the judge, anybody, to charge this man with murdering and taking away two beautiful black lives at the ripe ages of 26 and 36. It's disgusting. We can't go to the store, rest in peace, Trayvon Martin. We can't lay in bed, rest in peace, Breonna Taylor. And we can't even protest without our lives being on the line. And that's what we fight for, what we fight for.
So there you have it, Mike. I mean, the propaganda machine worked. It did what it was aiming to do. And we lost two beautiful black lives.
They might have been trans black.
Well, what I think is they could have been, and we've seen that before.
We can't assume.
Yeah.
So.
What I find interesting is, like, when I looked into this a little bit more, he got the age of the victims right. I mean, he got their age actually right. The two people that died, he got their age right. He just didn't happen to look at the color of their skin.
Right.
And I mean, that's fine.
And
I
it
guess
shouldn't matter.
In reality, that's what Martin Luther King wanted, right? Like he wanted us to judge people by the content of their character, maybe even their age, and not the color of their skin. So in one he didn't want the skin color to matter, right? Like you said, it shouldn't matter. But in this case, it matters because the media wants it to matter, and they don't want you to know that Kyle Rittenhouse shot two black or two white people, right? They want the skin color to matter, even though it's not accurate, right? And they don't want you to know that one of the people that he shot was coming at him with a gun raised and pointed at him, and that was an act of self-defense, and that the other was chasing him down into
and
a
hitting
place.
him in the head with a skateboard.
Exactly. And so it's like the truth doesn't matter.
Yeah,
right?
like the jury didn't just arbitrarily come to the conclusion that they came to. They came to that conclusion after weeks of trial, right? And even so, and I just have to go back to this. Like even the guy that got shot in the arm and it like destroyed his bicep,
Right.
but he like lived to testify.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can even say against Kyle Rittenhouse because it was really his testimony that got Kyle Rittenhouse like cleared. He said under oath that Kyle did not shoot his gun until he had a gun pointed at him.
Right.
And then later, and this is what CNN reported,
Yes.
later he confirmed that he didn't actually have his gun pointed at Kyle Rittenhouse.
Even though the video shows that he clearly did. And
Right.
what he
so
said is
he testified that he did and did not have
Under
his
oath.
gun under oath
Yep.
pointed at Kyle Rittenhouse. So I don't know if there is a case for perjury there for saying two things that completely contradict one another. If one is true, then the other one cannot be true, right? So
Right.
I'm not going to try and.
What I do find interesting is that under oath, he did have the gun pointed at Kyle Rittenhouse. Then later, when he wasn't under oath but was just talking with Anderson Cooper or whomever else, right? He said, well, I'd like to clarify that I didn't have my gun pointed.
And
but
he did clarify that during his cross-examination as
really?
well. That
Okay.
that he did not. I think he may have actually said he did not intentionally have his gun pointed, and that's the part that's important to
Sure,
CNN is that it wasn't he didn't try to. He just had his gun out and in his hand, but he didn't try to point it at Kyle Rittenhouse, even though he was running at Kyle. He didn't start running away until there was another gun pointed at him, and the video evidence shows that. Anyway, I'll get out.
I think it's important, right? Because again, like these are all things that are continually leveraged, and I think this is why we constantly try and say, like, read between the lines, like pay attention not to what people tell you to think, but really pay attention to the evidence and to the details and to the facts and to the truth, right? Because what's really happening now is you have on the back end of this an entire people group who have been told for the last, I don't know, how long has it been, right, since this incident occurred, right, in Kenosha. Ever since then, the media has controlled the narrative. They've continued to say that this was racially motivated. They've continued to say that Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist, that because he gave the OK sign and was hanging out with, the Proud Boys, that somehow he's some racist, right? When in all actuality, he says that he supports Black Lives Matter, but that's not what they want you to hear. They don't want you to hear the truth. The media does not want you to know the truth about Kyle Rittenhouse. What they want you to know is what they want you to think. That's what they want you to know.
They don't really want you to know the truth about anything.
No.
For that matter. They just want you to know what they think.
Right. And what they want you to think, right?
Exactly.
And that's the whole point of newspeak, right? And so we will transition, like you said, into the Wisconsin Waukesha, is that how you say it? Waukesha attack. Now, I love how this article from the Washington Examiner talks about it because it calls it what it is, right? But it also calls out the media because it's saying the media blackout of the Waukesha attack is intentional. And this is coming from Kaylee McGee White. Her last name's White, so you can probably tell that she where she lines up on things. But anyway, a little more than a week ago, now this is an article that came out on November 30th, shortly after Thanksgiving, but she said a little more than a week ago, a deranged criminal intentionally drove his SUV through a crowd at the Waukesha Christmas parade, killing 6 people and injuring dozens. 8 children are still in the hospital. The national media don't seem to care. Local news outlets are tracking the health status of the victims and law enforcement's response to the attack, but for some reason many of the national publications seem to have lost interest, especially in the suspect, Darrell Brooks. The last time the New York Times and Washington Post published a story about the attack was last week. Left-leaning news outlets such as MSNBC and CNN have done their best to avoid mentioning Brooks at all. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel was the first to report that the suspect was a career criminal with a violent history. The publication also revealed that Brooks was only out on the road that day because Milwaukee County's district attorney made an inappropriately low bail recommendation after Brooks was charged with, get this, you ready for this, Mike? Running his girlfriend over with a car. Brooks was involved in another domestic disturbance before he allegedly drove into the parade route. In at least one of its reports about the attack, CNN failed to mention Brooks by name until the very last paragraph. The original headline for the report also excluded the suspect as if it had been a driverless car that rammed through the parade. Waukesha will hold a moment of silence Sunday, it read, 1 week after a car plowed through Christmas parade. CNN has revised the story to mention the suspect by name, but only referring to him as a suspect during one of the segments. So this is what we're talking about, right?
Do you remember the Unite the Right rally in
For sure.
Charlottesville?
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty sure there's a trial going on.
It's over. They
it's
already
over?
are holding the rally organizers responsible for the one victim that was killed.
Okay.
In that.
And
in
there,
that.
yeah. So there was a guy who drove his
Yeah.
car into
Yep.
a group of counter protesters.
Yep. And killed a young lady, or a
Yeah, and
early 20s woman.
personally, I think there's an argument even to be made that getting hit by the car wasn't actually what killed her. If you look into a lot of the facts that are surrounding it, she died of like a heart attack, which is weird.
Bizarre, yeah.
A lot of people, even like eyewitness testimonies, say that she wasn't even one of the people that got hit by the car, but she died while she was there. Kind of a lot like some of the police officers that died during the Capitol riots, died of like medical issues that weren't physically related to any of the protesters, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, mass outrage.
For sure.
Precedent-setting mass outrage
Right.
that is convincing people that the right is like breeding terrorists, that the right is racist, that the
Yep.
right is that conservatism is just some sort of mass delusion.
Right.
On the flip side, you have a guy who on all of his social medias is very, very clear about where he aligns politically. He wants white people dead. He drives his truck or SUV into a parade of people celebrating Christmas.
Yep.
Primarily a white crowd. I
Yep.
mean, let's just call it what it
Yeah.
is. Silence. I mean, and I don't want to say silence, but I mean, it seems like they're really trying to protect this guy's identity, which is like the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
Like, why can't we just call a criminal a criminal? You know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
why can't we at least be consistent and, like, let there be outrage when there are similar attacks that are going on? Why is he not being called a terrorist?
Well, that's a wonderful question when it only took, 1 day to charge somebody with terrorism in the school shooting, right?
Yeah.
I think part of it is that there is, you look at who's in charge on the, on in the Milwaukee area, and it's left-leaning people, right? In
Yeah.
fact, I think one of the things that was brought up in this whole thing is that the Milwaukee soft on crime left district attorney John Chisholm once admitted in 2007 that his approach might get people hurt, that his approach to social justice reform. He was quoted as saying, quote, "Is there going to be an individual I divert or put into a treatment program who's going to go out and kill somebody?" End quote. You bet. He went on to say, "It's guaranteed to happen, but it does not invalidate the overall approach." So he's already acknowledging we're putting criminals back on the streets because we want bail reform, we want social justice reform, we don't want this systematic racism inside of the judicial system. So does that mean that there's going to be repeat offenders? Yeah. I mean, this guy that we're talking about, Brooks, had a 50-page rap sheet, which included the offense of running his girlfriend over with a car. That's what he was out on bail for.
This just in, keeping criminals off the street, racist.
Right. And they essentially that's what they're getting at, is that the criminal justice system is so systemically racist that the only alternative to a systemically racist system is to put repeat criminals on the streets. And
Yeah.
it's not like this guy had one bad choice in his past. He had multiple offenses, including statutory rape. I think from Arizona or Nevada or something like that. But,
Yeah, and now that language, I've even seen articles saying that that language is going to be altered to be sex without consent instead of statutory rape.
Well, and it was
because it's offensive towards the people who have committed the crime.
But what about the fact that it is statutory rape is, what is that? I mean, isn't that a minor? Like,
it is, yeah.
And this person was, I think, 14.
No, he had sexual relations with an underage woman.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was minor attracted, right? He's not a pedophile.
He was minor attracted.
Yeah, he was minor attracted. I mean, that's the world in which we live, Mike. It's gross. It's disturbing. And now on the backside of it, we can't even call a true thing true. And to be honest, one thing that I wanted to talk about is I really think, even though he is a criminal, a repeat criminal, I also think that he is also the victim of the propaganda. He was angry. He did post on his social media, Instagram and other places, how angry he was with this verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, because he also had been drinking the Kool-Aid that the mainstream media was sending. So they agitated a career criminal with misinformation. And because of that, who knows how big of a role that played, but he was involved in these black nationalist organizations, Black Lives Matter and all these others, right, that are, again, propagating all of these lies and misinformation, which actually end up stirring the pot most of the time and creating, you don't like your picture being up there.
It's been up there for a while.
Well, we'll do this. I like I said, you're the eye candy of the show, Mike, so what can I do? But anyway, I mean, the propaganda machine did its job. It made another black man angry using misinformation and lies. And then again, who was killed in this parade? Who was it? White people.
Yep. And yeah, man, it's like people don't care. I mean, people do care, right? Like, I've seen a lot of people essentially trying to create a narrative on social media because the media won't do it, right? So the people are having to be the ones that are creating the narrative. And it's not a subversive narrative. It is literally just reporting what happened and then telling people, hey, remember this? Hey, don't let this die. We're being memory holed right now.
Right.
Like, just like every other inconvenient tragedy that has happened in the last, 10 plus years, if it doesn't fit a certain narrative, the news is going to forget about it in like no time at all and move on. We have to start holding them accountable to that.
For sure.
We can't keep going back to these news outlets and rewarding them with our viewership when they continue to treat us like this.
Well, and I think that's part of the point, and I hope people wake up. I mean, this has nothing to do with the show, but we saw what happened to Chris Cuomo this week because of his choices, right? And I mean, none of us, I don't think, are surprised by that reality, right?
Yeah.
Like, I certainly am not. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less, because we're not talking about journalists. We're talking about people with very politically driven agendas that are trying to genuinely control the message, control the narrative. Donald Trump said that there was good people on both sides. Donald Trump is a racist. He's never denounced the racism that took place in Charlottesville, even though that's a lie.
I condemn.
Keep condemning. We're never going to report it as such. And that's the reality, right? Quid pro quo. Like, you name it, right? Russia, collusion, right? Like, all of this stuff. Like, the only thing I care about in this conversation is pay attention. Like, are you awake yet? Are you realizing what's happening yet? Like, what's it going to take for you to understand that there is an agenda here and that there are people, there's a war going on for our minds, Mike. That's what I want people to understand. Yep. That's what I care about.
Yeah.
And so we're going to take a break, a short commercial break. But when we come back, we're actually going to discuss how this actually isn't and shouldn't be something that we actually find to be that out of the blue, because it's been going on really almost since the beginning of time. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to spend the next bit of our show talking about that. So don't go anywhere. We're going to take a short commercial break here. And when we come back, we'll discuss that together. And we'll see you back on the flip side. Hello, friends. My name is Jason, and I'm one of the co-hosts of the Pugnacious Pilgrim podcast. Do you find it difficult to determine truth from error, good from evil, or fact from fiction in a world where moral lines seem to be constantly shifting? We get it. We're living in some crazy times, and sometimes that makes it difficult to know exactly how a Christian is supposed to be faithful to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's why we're here. We started this podcast with the purpose of taking a look at the world from a Christian's point of view. We fully acknowledge that a Christian worldview will not be popular by today's standards, but that doesn't make it any less important or necessary. Our hope is to have conversations that are rooted in culturally relevant topics, but to do so while also allowing God's Word to be our guide and to have the final say. So if you feel alone, like a pilgrim in a strange land, and want to spend some time listening, learning, and participating in a conversation that will help you live boldly into the power of the Holy Spirit, then we invite you to join us every week for the Pugnacious Pilgrim podcast. Mike and I won't pretend to have all the answers, but what we do promise is to do our best at discerning truth from error and having some fun along the way. So if you're looking for something different than what you've already found so far, we encourage you to give us a try. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor, tell your friends. For more information about the Pugnacious Pilgrim, check out our website at www.pugnaciousPilgrim.com. Thanks again, Pilgrims. Stay pugnacious. Well, welcome back, Pilgrims. That's just a pitch about us. Check us out. Go to our website. We got some cool gear there. Mike's wearing our shirt right now. Christmas is coming, and these are cool things that you could buy for your family and friends. Mike, did you get your coffee cup yet?
Oh yeah.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I've been using it every day.
I thought I ordered it, but I don't think I did. So that's going to be on my Christmas list for Anna. I got a sticker, which is on the back of my laptop, which you can't see right now, but it's pretty cool. So there's a lot of gear there. If you're looking for ways to support our show and get something out of the deal, just go and check out our merchandise and maybe gift it to some family and friends. What's your dad think about his hat?
He loves it.
That's
he was
good.
really excited to get it.
I'm excited for him. I mean, he's really only the fourth person in the history of this podcast to wear that specific hat. So I'm excited for him. Well, we actually have an article that we wanted to get to tied to Thanksgiving and maybe even tied a little bit to this propaganda conversation. And so we'll roll out to Nick Nichols because he put some good work in from the Wokeville Gazette, and we don't want to shortchange him. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back. A local family from New Mexico was shocked to discover they were responsible for spreading more than kindness this Thanksgiving.
I really don't know what to say. We've tried our best to be kind and responsible during the pandemic, and we're stunned and disappointed, to say the least.
The Jenkins family has done everything right in order to avoid getting or spreading COVID. They have continued to wear masks, both indoors and outdoors. They are fully vaccinated, including booster shots, and have remained vigilant to ensure they are following the constantly changing rules and protocols put out by the CDC.
We really don't understand what happened. When the pandemic first hit America, we decided right away that we were going to do everything in our power to ensure we wouldn't be a cause of hardship or loss for anyone else. We quickly came up with the family motto, spread kindness, not COVID, and we've done everything in our power to live up to that latitude.
Sadly, regardless how hard the Jenkins family has tried to do their part, it was discovered last Friday that Jill Jenkins, Terry's wife, had not only tested positive for COVID-19, but had shared it with the family she gathered with on Thanksgiving.
Dr. Fauci told us as long as we were fully vaccinated, we could feel good about enjoying a typical Thanksgiving with our family and close friends. So that's what we did. We vetted the list of family and friends. Anyone who refused to follow the science and get vaccinated was immediately uninvited. We wore masks the entire time, except while we were eating. And we even prayed that God would protect our selfish and careless family members who were unvaccinated from spreading COVID to innocent people.
Ironically, even with all the effort put into ensuring they were being safe, Jill not only had COVID, but spread it to her entire family.
We just received a call from the final family member today. As sad as it is, all 18 people who gathered together for Thanksgiving have tested positive for COVID-19.
The good news, or silver lining if there is such a thing, is that the Jenkins will now have 14 days to reevaluate their efforts in order to come up with a new plan on how they are going to protect others and spread kindness instead of COVID moving forward.
Well, one thing we know for sure is that we're not going to lose hope. We followed the rules and did everything by the book. We trusted and followed the science, and we feel good about that. Even though things didn't work out as planned, we still chose kindness, and that's something we should feel good about. Even though none of us feel very good at all at the moment. So we're going to take advantage of these 14 days of quarantine and come up with a new game plan that we can live out together.
We did reach out to one unvaccinated family member who was uninvited from the Thanksgiving gathering for comment.
Look, man, first and foremost, I want to be clear that I'm praying for my family. To see the majority of your family stricken with COVID is never great, regardless of their vaccination status, so our thoughts and prayers are with them, and we're going to continue to pray and be there for them however they need. Even though we've been ostracized and blacklisted from our family, I still care about them deeply. We celebrated Thanksgiving with a few unvaccinated family members who are also excluded, as well as some of our closest friends. One thing we made sure to do was to thank God for our family and pray for everyone in the world who's struggling with COVID. In hindsight, I'm actually glad that we were uninvited, because we likely would have been dealing with COVID, just like everyone else.
Reporting for the Wokeville Gazette, this is Nick Nichols, Pugnacious Pilgrim, News. Nick, he's at it again, dude.
I have to say, even though it's satire, it's really not far from the truth. Our family is certainly split up because of, pro-vax, not even anti-vax, but like pro-choice, I guess.
Yeah.
So the people that get together for my family are like, they're the ones that have kind of determined that they're not going to be freaked out anymore. Meanwhile, it seems like all the other family members are like the ones that are constantly struggling with COVID, which is like the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
And then we even see it in popular culture too, right? Like, what is it? Like the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah.
Kyrie Irving is not vaccinated. He's just a basketball player, for those of you who don't know. And LeBron James is vaccinated. LeBron James got COVID before Kyrie Irving did.
Right.
Kyrie hasn't even gotten it.
I don't even know if he's really been able to play that much because
they haven't let him.
Right, because part of that is because of where he plays. New York has a vaccine mandate for anyone that goes into the stadium, and so he's not going to be able to play. But that's that's
just so strange.
And we kind of got in an argument, if you will, a discussion on the socials this week with a mutual friend. Someone that I would say is a mutual friend. And he was adamant, Mike, that you and I and our stance on this whole thing is killing people, and that there's blood on our hands
on
because of it. On our hands, yeah. And part of me, I have sensitivity in my heart because I think it's very evident just looking at some of the accusations and points that he was making in this discussion that he truly believes what he's been fed. And he believes that if you get vaccinated, you can't spread COVID, you can't get COVID, you're doing the kind thing, you're protecting everyone, and you're being selfless. And those that choose not to get the vaccination are not only being selfish, but they are the ones that are spreading COVID to others and keeping us from going back to normal.
Right. And if you really dissect his argument, his whole point was that if you are unvaccinated, you could spread COVID to another unvaccinated person,
right,
and you are putting their life at risk.
Right.
And it's like, well, if they're unvaccinated, how am I the one putting their life at risk? Aren't they also responsible for putting their lives at risk? Also, is the blood still on your hands if you are fully vaccinated and you give somebody COVID and they end up going to the hospital and dying? Who's like, is the blood on your hands for giving it to them, or whose hands
No.
are bloody?
The only bloody hands, if you listen to the mainstream media, the only bloody hands are those that are still willfully choosing to not get vaccinated. Everybody who is vaccinated has done the right thing, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Germany. If you're vaccinated, you can do all of the things that a normal person can do. Go to
Including
concerts.
being euthanized.
Exactly. You can't get euthanized. You cannot be killed by a doctor if you're unvaccinated. So what we need you to do is take your first dose. 28 days later, you can take your second dose, and then you can come in, and we will gladly take your life.
We'll put you out of your misery.
Yeah. But until you are willing to not take other people's lives with your life, then we will not take your life. That is a privilege that you
Dude.
do not get unless you're vaccinated.
Yeah. So I know I took it that way, but that is just for the pilgrims. That is actually a real story.
Right.
There are like euthanasia clinics in Germany that are refusing customers, if that's what you want to call them, for not being vaccinated. And like when I read that, a friend of ours posted it, we've had him on the show,
Yeah.
Dan. I commented on it and I was like, it's things like this that like day by day I read things like this, and it's so hard for me not to make the connections between this and like the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we won't let you die until you receive this.
Right.
Like, you are not ready to die until you have injected yourself with this vaccine. That is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. I could just not get the vaccine and then go intentionally get COVID and then go to the hospital and say, hey, doc, throw me on a ventilator and, treat me with remdesivir, and then my organs will fail.
Right, exactly. Well, you might as well go that way, because at least then you won't have to get the vaccination. But, again, this is all tied into this larger conversation about misinformation, right? And the people who have the means and the mechanisms to get the message out and the misinformation out are the ones that control the narrative.
Yeah.
And so for me, again, I don't want to call it a mission, but it is very important to me to engage people in conversation who have these outlandish claims that they're making. And in this case specifically, like a friend of mine, Mike, a friend of yours, and not a great friend, like not someone that I'm super close with, but I know you go way back with this person's family. And for him to have the audacity, Mike, to tell you that you have blood on your hands because of the decision that you're making about a medical decision about your body, right? And your convictions, not even just a decision about your body, but one that's deeply rooted into your religious convictions, and yet you're the one that's going to have blood on your hands, and you know better.
Well, and this was, the way that this came about was I just posted a question, or I posed a question on my Facebook, and I was like, would a government that really cares about your health and safety enable your company to fire you and take away your health insurance for non-compliance? Because that doesn't really seem like something
they have
someone would do if they had your best interest in mind,
for you,
right? And he goes, are you talking about the non-vaccinated people or whatever? And then we just kind of got into it. I just said, like, what do you think, Jeff?
Yeah.
And well, I guess his name's out there now, whatever. He, man, the weirdest part is he and I have never had an argument about this.
Yeah.
We've never argued about it.
Yeah.
We've never talked about it. As a matter of fact, he had me and another really good friend of mine at his house about a month ago, knowing both of us are unvaccinated, and didn't say a single word to either one of us to our faces.
Yeah.
And then as soon as it's convenient for him to basically just like rip us
Blast you.
apart,
Yeah.
he goes for it. And then he even had the audacity to say, I could beat this point to death with you. We could argue until the day is done. And I know you wouldn't change your mind. And I'm like, well, how do you know that?
Right.
You've literally never even talked to me about
Right.
it. You have convinced yourself that I am unreasonable before you have
Right.
even allowed me to open my mouth.
And he's laid the gauntlet out, like
Yeah.
basically saying, I would enlighten you, but I know it's just a waste of my time,
Right.
so I'm not going to do that. And he took the
Yeah.
same approach with me. And what I tried to do when I weighed in was simply say, look, dude, my company is forcing us to vaccinate, knowing that a large percentage of us work from home 100% of the time. The only rule that my company has to push this mandate on us is one that comes from OSHA, who has, in the meantime, stopped enforcing this because it's been blocked by multiple lawsuits and judges across the nation. So they're not even enforcing it anymore. But my company is choosing to take this non-legal, it's not a law, but the mandates in, just like any regulation, like if you come into the, if you're painting, you got to have a ventilator or whatever, work safety, right? I work from my house. I don't go into the office and expose anybody else in the office to anything that I have, whether it's flu or strep throat or, tuberculosis, HIV, it doesn't matter, right? Like anything that I have, right? But they're going to use this fictitious ordinance from OSHA, who doesn't even have the jurisdiction, and now we're left, Mike, you and me, ones who are potentially losing our jobs.
And I am in the same boat as you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're the ones that are left, thinking like we're the bad guys because we're choosing freedom over tyranny. And so, again, this is just another example of how the propaganda machine works. Like our friend is convinced that we are the bad guys, and that's because he is believing everything that people are feeding him, even though it's not true, even though Dr. Fauci has told us all, time and time again, even as he's saying get the vaccination, also saying, look, even if you're vaccinated, wear a mask because you too can spread the disease, and you're probably more likely to be asymptomatic and not even know that you're doing it.
Yeah.
But this is a tale that's as old as time, and we want to look to Genesis 3 to try and, paint this picture that the propaganda machine's been around
really
for a
quick,
while.
you're stuck on my face again.
I love your face, Mike. I can't get over it. I'm sorry. Do you want me to put it on my face? You
put it on your face.
All right, I'll put it on my face for a little while. But we're going back to you, Mike, because you're selling it, right? Like one of the things I told you when we went to the live, with cameras. I have a face for radio. You have a face that is slightly less than a lot of the pictures of Jesus that have been painted,
Jason,
like on the
stop.
Sistine Chapel. And I'm taking, and not only that, look, dude, I'm married. I'm happily married. We're looking at 22 years. You're a single guy. Like I want the ladies to see what you're missing out on, and I'm trying to promote you as best as I can because you love Jesus. You're a guy who wants a family. You want to raise children. You want to blow up the TV, throw away the paper,
move
to the country.
As we determined at the beginning of this podcast, I want to establish dominance.
So anyway, on that note, thank you. I don't know. We got to maybe just come up with a signal like caw-caw, like if something, if I'm stuck on your face, because I don't know. I'm trying to do maybe too many things at the same time. But Genesis 3, this is where misinformation, propaganda, disinformation started. And it says, now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. But the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. And then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. We know that, the story of the fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the enemy's tactics, his tricks, his evil, his deceit, I mean, we understand that this has been around forever, right? This is not a new thing plaguing humanity, right?
No.
Disinformation, misinformation. The point of propaganda is to convince us away from the truth and to convince us towards something that is a mistruth or disinformation that will keep us from the truth and ultimately keep us from peace and joy and happiness and all the things that God desires and desired for humanity all along.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and oh man, I might get in trouble for this, but I'll intentionally try to not get in trouble for this. We have proof in Genesis that we are susceptible to manipulation.
Yeah.
We have examples of how this manipulation is brought about. We also know that that the propaganda is creating weak men.
Yeah.
And it is enabling women to try and dominate these weak men that go along with whatever stuff is being fed to them, because men are so starved for female attention nowadays that they're willing to just lay down and be like, oh, well, at least I have a girlfriend, like, or at least I can, and they're like, we have an incredible lack of just like principled men, which, by the way, the reason that the fall happened arguably was because we had a man who is not principled, which is why he was punished.
That's
right?
a very good point.
And we have a woman who is not principled, right? Like, and we, it's amazing that we even have these scriptures that we can study so we can learn what it means to be principled and what it means to run after the morality that God has put in front of us and to pick up our crosses and follow Christ. It's amazing that we even have like the Sermon on the Mount to like, to use as a mirror for like our own morality. Like, are we holding up to this? Without all of this, we are just simply Adam and Eve.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's a great point. I think it's something that we should acknowledge. I think when I look at misinformation, to me, that's where my mind always goes is like, dude, of course, like there's deception. Like our enemy, our struggle is not against flesh and blood. It seems like it is, right? Like, let's go Brandon, right? But that's not our true struggle. Our true struggle is what it has always been, right? Is that there's principalities and rulers of this world that have a very clear agenda. It is to seek and kill and destroy. And really, in essence, what they're ultimately trying to do is rob God the glory that is due his name. That's what Satan is after. He doesn't, we're all collateral damage in his game. He misuses people. He'll abuse people. He'll use people to his advantage. But ultimately, what he's trying to do is take worship away from God. God deserves the glory. God deserves the worship. We are God's, right? We're God's people. I'm not saying we're God's. I'm saying that we are God's.
We belong to God.
Right. We belong to
Possessive
God.
apostrophe
Yes,
S
exactly.
at the end of God's.
Yes, exactly. I guess we got to be careful because I don't want to,
we're not trying to be like,
no, we're not demigods or even, Jehovah's Witness for that matter.
Yeah.
But, I think it's important for people to understand that, right? Because, we talk about propaganda and it's easy to use examples of it and for people to think that it's all political or tied to political sides or political agendas. It's not. And to your point even, right? Like what we're trying to do even on this show is convince people of truth, right? And I would hope that we would use truth to get them to that point. But what did the enemy do? The enemy tried to use truth too, just enough, right? But also misuse that truth, just like he did when he was tempting Jesus in the desert, right? Like he used semblances of the truth. He used parts of the truth and then convinced Adam and Eve that the truth that they knew was not true at all.
Right.
And that he had some enlightenment or better information that was going to lead them to a better place.
Yeah.
So
honestly, if you're getting frustrated with the news media, the only truth you really need to pay attention to is the truth that's provided to us in the Bible.
And you said something along those lines, right? Like I just loved it. It was a post maybe even this morning on Facebook where you're like, regardless what problem you're facing in this world, like you said something
the answers
like,
in Scripture, or the answer can be found in Scripture.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's true whether you believe it or not.
Right.
It's still true. Speaking of quotes, I just have to say something really quick because I've been on this kick of like, there's this YouTuber John Doyle, right? And really, I was turned on to this John Doyle guy. This is not an endorsement.
Right.
I don't agree with everything he says, but he's pretty on point with
Yeah.
a lot of stuff. One of his quotes, as quoted by our friend Zach, just have to throw his name in
Yeah,
here
for sure.
really quick. But
Love Zach.
the quote is that, and again, it's from John Doyle. It says, "We aren't in an intellectual battle. If it was an intellectual battle, we would win. But we're not winning, we're losing. Because this is a spiritual battle, and we are not well."
Right. We're not spiritually well.
No, we're not. We're not at all. And this is 100% in line with any scriptural argument you could make. That is why we are losing, is because we are not making the main thing as a whole. There are so many people who, and I feel like I need to call another podcast out, is the Hard Men podcast, the piety versus pietism.
Yeah, PD versus
from
or
the Hard
piety,
Men
yeah.
podcast. I feel like that was really good too,
Mhm.
because it goes both ways. We have a lot of Christians who are so like faith focused that they really like aren't pushing to do a lot of good in the world,
Right.
you know, and they're kind of like, I mean, this is like the classic Calvinist issue, is that a lot of Calvinists feel like, oh, well, I can just kind of like hang out here, and like, if God's going to move me, then like God's going to move me, you know? And that's like kind of the meme around Calvinism, is that Calvinists will just sit around and wait for God to do these things. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are a lot of right-wing people that are completely forgetting that the only reason any of our conservative values like hold any importance is because of the morality that was designed by God and
Right.
bestowed on us. Like the law that was given to us, the Jesus that died on the cross for us, is being completely forgotten by these people who are completely obsessed by politics.
Yeah. Yep.
We need to marry the two together
Right.
as they should be married.
Right, and as they always intended to be, right?
Yeah.
Because God owns everything, right? And so
Yes.
God owns our politics. God is sovereign over all things, right? And that's not a pass for us to be passive, right? And I think to your point, right? Like there's a lot of people that well, I'm just going to focus on my own personal holiness, right? And I'm just going to be holy, and I'm just going to let my light shine in my basement, Like no, it doesn't work that way, right? Like
Yeah.
God is making
I'm
you
gonna
holy.
let my light shine in my basement.
Right, like God is making us holy so that, right, we can live out Matthew 5, right, where we let our light shine so bright that others would see our good works and give glory to God, right? Like we have to be in the world as people of light, right?
Yeah.
And I think, the thing that I really appreciated about that piety and pietism is that he believed in piety. He said it's a good thing. It's
Yes.
not bad, right? Where it becomes bad is when it becomes the main thing, when that pietism becomes our the end game, right?
Yeah.
And it's not, right? What this world needs right now is not more nice guys. What this world needs right now, and I hate the word nice, because Jesus wasn't nice. Jesus
Right.
was not nice.
Yeah, kindness was not the ultimate virtue with Jesus.
I mean, he was always kind. Jesus
He
was
was.
always kind, but his kindness extended
More
to
than that,
the
he was righteous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why he was kind even when he was flipping tables over in the temple, right? Because his kindness brought him to that place of righteous anger.
Yeah.
And we need people that are willing to be righteously angry. We need people that are willing to go preach the gospel to their school board and let the school board be reprimanded by a Christian man who is willing to say, look, we're not going to take it anymore. And so, I get it, right? The things that Mike and I say are sometimes provocative. They make people angry. I'm sure a lot of Christians are like, oh my gosh, oh man.
Harden up.
Yeah.
Harden up.
That's
Seriously.
part of what we're trying to say here is the world is lost, and they need a firm shepherd to grab his staff and lead God's people back into the greener pastures.
Yeah. And I just have to clarify. I said harden up. I don't mean harden your hearts.
Right.
I do not mean that. I mean put on the armor of God.
Right, yeah.
Okay? Study Scripture. Wield the sword of
Yes.
Scripture. don't back down. Don't be a coward
Right.
when it comes to having to take like moral stands that put you in a tough spot,
Right.
socially or economically. Like, we can't be cowards. What kind of job are we doing representing the one true God and the Messiah by backing down whenever, our enemies like back us into a corner? We back down and we go, oh, well, I guess the Bible really it's really up for debate. It's like, I've witnessed so many lazy arguments like that just because people are afraid of their fellow man.
They're trying to be nice.
Come on, guys. Like, stop it. Stop
Right.
it.
Yes. And that's so true, dude. And that's the heartbeat behind Pugnacious, right?
Yeah.
Is that it is time for us to put on our big boy pants, if you will. And I like that terminology, like harden up, like God sometimes called his men to stand at the wall with the sword in their hand, praying at all times, but ready to fight.
Yeah.
And does God need America in order to accomplish his will? No, but America is here.
Yeah.
And unless godly men stand up and fight the good fight, like the America that we know of is not here. And you know what? America is far from perfect. We know that. We've talked about that so much, and I'm not even pretending that politics can be the savior. It can't.
No.
But what I can tell you is, of all the nations on God's green earth right now, America is still an opportunity for the beacon of hope. We have the freedom to preach our gospel. If you go north across the border of America, you cannot preach the gospel of Jesus Christ in freedom.
Yeah, in the same capacity.
Right. Like you can preach it, but you're going to prison because you condemned homosexuality. You can preach it, but you're going to jail, or you're going to be penalized because you said that, homosexuality is a sin, and you're not affirming, the things that the culture has deemed, hate speech. Right.
Right.
And so the point that we're trying to make is, unless brave Christian men stand up, and women, but I think I hate to say this, but women are rocking it right now in a lot of ways. These mama bears that are going to the school boards, we've talked about that, right? It's time for men to stand up and act like men. Be strong, courageous, love your family enough to fight for truth. And you know what? If that costs you your bowling league, then so be it. Eternity is far more important. And not only that, but if it means you lose your job because you're taking a stand for freedom, like, just know that can honor God, right? Like, Mike and I are two guys that are being put in a position where our jobs are on the line, but freedom that comes through Christ. It is for freedom's sake that Christ has set us free. Freedom is ours, not because the government has given it to us, but because God has given it to us. And that's a gospel-centered message. I don't care how you try and slice it. It's not about the vaccine for me, right? I don't know what the vaccine is. I don't know what's in it. I don't particularly care, because I've been on the fence about the vaccine a long time. But when freedom became the issue, it was a whole nother ballgame for me, Mike. And Christ gave me freedom. My government doesn't. And if we're not careful, we are going to be in a position just like Germany, where they're saying, you know what? If you're not vaccinated, you don't get to go to the grocery store.
Yeah, you're excommunicated from society.
You are. And we've seen how that plays out.
Yep.
Like, we've watched that logic play out literally in the history of the world, and we know exactly where it leads.
Yeah.
It leads to gulags. It leads to ghettos. It leads to bad things. And you can do it all in the under the guise of safety or security or whatever you want to call it, but it doesn't lead to eternal joy in Christ. It actually leads to a very different place.
Absolutely. And as Christians, we have a moral obligation to stand up and fight for our values, because if we don't, who will?
Right. And
if we don't, we know who is going to establish the morality of the day.
The deceiver.
It's going to be.
God has given dominion to Satan to do what Satan is going to do. And this world is not moving closer to Jesus. And it doesn't matter how kind or nice you are. Your efforts to be nice and not say hard things to people when hard things are necessary for them to hear is not going to lead people to eternal salvation in Jesus. It's going to do the opposite. It's going to let them continue to walk the path that they're already on, which is going to lead them to hell eternally.
Yeah.
God's damnation eternally. And if you want to talk about blood on hands, there will be blood on our hands if we don't speak up and share the truth. And that's not a political truth. Sometimes politics might come into play, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the truth of Jesus Christ, the truth of salvation, the truth that there is one way to heaven, that Jesus came to save sinners, but it's going to cost them something. It's going to cost them their life. It's going to cost them their loyalty to their own selfish ambitions, to their own sin-filled lifestyles. It's going to cost them. They have to lay down their lives, pick up their cross, and choose to follow their Savior and King and Lord daily.
Yep.
That's not an easy path.
No, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. You know, I didn't become a Christian because it was convenient.
Right.
It's been the most inconvenient thing that's ever happened in my life. But I'll tell you, it's worth it.
It's
and
worth it.
that's really my plea to anybody who might be listening to this message is repent, turn to Christ. Put the old you to death. Turn to Christ and be renewed. Learn what his values look like. Fight for those values. Stand up for those values. Help others understand the difference between right and wrong. If you love people, you will do this for them.
Yeah. It's the only loving thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, it's hard. It's really, really hard. You know, I know we sit here and we talk about it like it's easy, and like
it's not easy when your job's on the line.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one thing that I try to say, you know, is like, dude, the easy path is to toe the line. The easy path is compliance. The easy path is compromise. The hard path is standing up for things that are right now countercultural and things that people
the gate is narrow.
It's narrow. And Christianity costs. You know, the gift of salvation is absolutely free. There's nothing we could do to earn it. It is a gift from God. That is true. But discipleship and growing in holiness does cost us something. And so, pilgrims, what we want you to understand is that there is a perishing world out there, right?
Yeah.
And that God is making his appeal to that world through us. And sometimes that means that we have to stand firm in our convictions, even when it costs us something. Be aware. There's an enemy out there, and he is manipulating people. There's a war going on for your mind. So take every thought captive, bring it to the scripture, and see if it lines up. And if it doesn't, run from it. Do not walk, run. Mike, give us a shout out, brother.
We love you, pilgrims. God bless you. Stay pugnacious.